All right, we are live. Jared, when you see the count level up a little bit, feel free to get started.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you're at. We're going to wait till the attendee list here levels off, and we'll get started. Grab some coffee, beverage of your choice, and we'll jump into it here in just a minute. All right, good deal. So it looks like we've leveled off about 15, 20 folks, which is great. For those of you who aren't familiar, there is a Q&A option there in your little toolbar. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to throw your question in there. Either we'll answer it on the air, as it were, or we will answer it just through the conversation there in the Q&A with the team, the panelists here. Welcome. My name is Jared Evans. I'm the program manager for the STTR open topic. If you are not familiar with STTR, the acronym there is on the title slide. It's not a direct acronym, which throws people for a loop sometimes. But STTR is the sister program, if you will, to the Small Business Innovative Research, the SBIR program. We were talking just before we went live on the air here that STTR is, it's a really unknown entity to a lot of folks. The program itself has been around since 1992. So we're working on 30 years of the program being a thing. But it's funny, it's still an unknown entity to a lot of folks. So again, we're going to kind of step through the program. We're going to talk about some of the differences between STTR and SBIR, some of the similarities. We're going to talk about what STTR looks like in functions. We're going to talk about some, like one of our cohorts, to kind of give you a feeling of the depth and breadth of the program and what we're here to do. And certainly we're going to answer questions, kind of talk through things. And if you'd like to know more and know how to engage, we can certainly kind of talk through that as well. So without further ado, we're going to step to the slides here. So a couple things. One, STTR is a phased development program that's here to commercialize dual use research. So commercializing dual use research is really the core here. We're trying to elicit some of the research that's sitting in the labs, the great IP that's floating around from the U.S. research community. That includes certainly the DoD space, but really that includes and is principally the commercial space, right? Most of research is done outside of the DoD, at universities, at other kind of research entities, federally funded research and development centers, nonprofits. There's all different kinds of R&D type of organizations that are doing great work, and we want to kind of elicit that into the commercial market so that at the end of the day, the Air Force can be a partner, one, in the development, but two, be a customer for these commercial entities that come out, right? We want to be able to leverage the technology and the IP that is coming out of that research community. So one of our jobs, excuse me, one of our jobs in doing that is facilitating engagement with you all, both on the commercial and on the government side, whether that be the users, whether it be the folks who kind of work in the application space, if you will, for some of these technologies. And, from a commercial perspective, we're leveraging some of this DoD R&D funding to buy down technology risk and to make things easier, frankly, to develop and commercialize these technologies. One thing that's interesting is that STTR is really on the border between a research grant, right, and that grant space with basic research and even applied research. But these opportunities, these STTR efforts, are all on government contracts. So when you get to the STTR realm, if you will, and being able to, you're looking to commercialize technology or assist in that commercialization from the government perspective, right? This is where things move from the grant space into the contract space. So you can look at it that way as well. All right, so one of the kind of the preeminent things on most people's minds when we're talking about STTR is the difference between the bigger brother, the SBIR, and STTR. So what's the difference in similarities, right? So similar to SBIR program, it's a 3-phase commercialization program that's codified in statute, right, in the U.S. code. Right, we still have the same phased approach. So that phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. The supplemental program, so TACFI and STRATFI, applies to STTR just the same as they do SBIR. The participation in the program for the companies results in a sole source justification for use across the federal space. So any federal agency can use can go sole source to these companies, regardless of who they're participating with. So an Air Force company could come in, receive a phase 1 or or a phase 2, and somebody in the Department of Agriculture, they can go straight to that company and utilize that sole source justification as an example. Also, with the open topic specifically, we have the same proposal timelines. So the proposals are due, they become available, all that kind of fun stuff at the same time. We utilize the same evaluation criteria and execution schedules for phase 1, phase 2, and so on, right? So as far as execution goes for the open topic, most anything that you see out in terms of timelines and execution strategy is going to be the same between SBIR and STTR. And that serves not only to kind of simplify the process and simplify our offerings, but also to kind of streamline and allow us to leverage some efficiencies in working with all these companies, working with these companies at the same time and in the same way. So that's one thing to make sure that we're kind of keep in mind is that, again, STTR starts with small business, right? So these are all businesses that are coming through the door. These aren't research teams. These aren't, universities, right? These are small businesses as defined by Small Business Administration. So this is the place where, a research team would need to go downtown, get their LLC, do their, kind of get registered as a business, and then they will be eligible for these opportunities. So to that end, STTR does have some specific caveats and specific opportunities that are different from SBIR. First is the presence of this third party, right? So we have typically with SBIR, we have the small business and the government working directly together to develop some kind of technology or product or something. The same is true with STTR with the addition of this third party, this research institution. So research institution is a proper term. It's a term defined, and we'll kind of walk through that here on a following slide. But that research institution has to do at least 30 or between 30 and 60% of the work. So that is by total cost of the proposal, right? Or the number of hours, labor hours, right? And so you could read more about that in the policy directive for the specifics there. But ultimately, again, that research partner has to do between 30 and 60% of the work. One thing that's really interesting too is that the research institution not only includes universities, as which is kind of what most people think of when they hear research institution, but it also includes nonprofits. It includes FFRDCs, so federally funded research and development centers. It includes hospitals in some cases. It includes military learning institutions in some cases. It includes a lot of different things. So there's a lot of opportunity here that are interesting. One of the things we were talking about again before we went live was a lot of VCs, so venture capital firms, have nonprofits that could potentially fall into this definition, right? So the nonprofits for those VC firms are used, to accelerate the business development and so on of the companies in that VC's portfolio. And so, our objectives are aligned in a lot of cases, depending on the details, right? And so that's really interesting when you think about who can participate in these programs. So from a nonprofit or a research organization standpoint, there's a real dollars and cents value proposition here for having your companies, and that technology to work through this process, because that research organization is going to get, we'll call it roughly half of the money that comes through these contracts. So when you think through the phase 1, phase 2, StratFi or TACFi, right, that's a non-trivial amount of money. So when it comes to research, that additional funding stream is a compelling thought process. So one of the other things that's really important here is that, or special about STTR, I should say, is that the principal investigator, that PI, can be primarily employed by the research entity, right? So, with SBIR, you expect the project lead, to be employed by that small business, right? And that can certainly be the case with STTR as well. But with STTR, they can also be primarily employed at the research institution. So if you think about, someone with a kind of a high opportunity cost, like a tenured professor, for instance, tenured professor is sitting at a university. He's got a bunch of postdocs that are doing some really compelling work. And he wants to kind of go out and do work in the private sector and develop some of this technology and commercialize it. He can go downtown, get his establish his LLC, pay his $30, and get all the proper registrations, and then be eligible for a STTR contract, phase 1, phase 2, supplemental programs like TACFi and StratFi, all without having to leave his primary day job, which is really interesting. And again, that can be someone at a university proper, like a tenured professor, like we talked about, or it can be somebody at one of these other institutions, right? Nonprofits or FFRDCs. So that really kind of opens the aperture for folks who can work through this program and take advantage of the R&D funding as we commercialize this technology from the research community. So there's a couple kind of really interesting caveats for STTR. So again, there's a lot of similarities in terms of execution, right? We evaluate the same things. We have the same objective as SBIR. We do a lot of the same things at the same time as SBIR. Even in execution, we have the same weekly meetings, so on and so forth, right? But who participates in the program and how they can participate it can be a bit different between the two. So we talked about research institution being a proper term. I'm not going to read the full definition here. This is from, you see the link there at the bottom. This is from the SBA's policy directive. The most recent version is from 2019. So you can follow that link, read the whole thing. It's not overly compelling, but this is an important piece. But yeah, like we said, there's a lot of opportunity here for organizations of different types than what we've seen historically to participate in the program. All right, so let's talk about X20D. So one thing I want to highlight before I get too far, I'm going to actually go back a little bit. So I highlighted the letters up here in the kind of the subtitle there. So you'll see the AF21.B/TCSO1. So one of the ways, that we reference these programs is through this code, this topic number that you'll see here at the top. It's a bit of a VIN number or in terms of the different pieces of the code mean different things. One way that you can tell SBIR versus STTR is that SBIR uses letters for the annual iteration. So for the second round in calendar year 2021, it was 21.B. For SBIR, that was 21.2. Another way that you can tell that is the T prefix before the CSO in this case. That T is specific to STTR. One of the ways you can tell us the open topic across tell us apart from other STTR topics is that we use this CSO, this commercial solutions offering type of solicitation. We do that across the open topics, regardless of programs, and that allows us some flexibility in how we cost match and do the contracting later on in the process. So we use those CSO documents as opposed to a BAA, which is something that you'll see normally. Anyway, so I wanted to highlight that before we get too far. So for this X20D, what supported the Agility Prime effort. So we can use these programs, STTR included, to support a lot of the ongoing kind of major muscle movements, both in AFWERX, like we did with Agility Prime, and with these other kind of big muscle movements for development. So, the primes are an easy case for this. So we used this program to kind of help bring together a lot of the connective tissue, as it were, with the Agility Prime effort. So Agility Prime, for those who aren't familiar, are working with, in technical terms, electric vertical takeoff and landing, with which includes, obviously the kind of the flying car concept, right, if you will. But obviously, in order for flying cars, we'll say, to be a viable market space in society, frankly, there's going to be a lot of things that need to kind of happen above and beyond just the vehicles themselves, right? So there needs to be the infrastructure, safety, and other types of infrastructure in place. There needs to be the subcomponent or component level manufacturers and competition to facilitate kind of forward development in specific markets. There's going to be a need for a lot of different types of things, right? And so, one, you can not only see kind of the breadth of impact for this particular topic, but you can also see there in the word cloud, and that's just coming from the titles. There's a lot of different types of materials, infrastructure, and other types of connective tissue, as we said, to make this market a more viable opportunity for the society, for this tech space. So we're also going to look at the breadth of engagement here, whether that be, and you can see when we get a little lighter, the shades get a little bit more kind of harder to distinguish depending on your screen contrast, I guess. But we're hitting nearly every state, not only with contractors, that is to say the number of companies, but also with the research institutions that those companies are partnering with. One of the things that you'll see is that the maps are not exactly the same. When you look at where the companies are and where those research institutions are, they're not the same place. There's a lot of kind of the same generalities, California, Ohio, Texas, but there's a significant difference in the numbers when you look at the scales there. So that's really important as well. And then with the level of engagement and level of funding, you can kind of see that in the top right with the bar graph there. In terms of submitted proposals, we broke all kinds of records with these X20Ds, with this X20D cohort, not only in just the number of proposals received, but also the amount of investment that went into it versus the legacy topic average, historical averages, and so on and so forth. So, the investment for this one topic, this one open topic iteration was more than the DoD has spent in a year for an entire service, which is a huge deal for phase ones. So, I mean, the level of investment is much higher. The program has historically kind of been underutilized in a variety of ways, and we're trying to not only educate on what the program is and how we're making this more effective overall, but we want to make sure that we're bringing in the best companies, the best technologies to serve the DoD community. Again, we want to be their customer at the end of the day, and so we're bringing our perspective on the world and on teaming and partnering through this open topic. All right, I didn't change the date on this, so I apologize for the. I need to that date should be October. I believe it's the 21st of October is when this next round is pushing forward. So if you are in the commercial space, or if you're in the government space and you have commercial partners in mind that you'd like to participate in the program, the next bogey for the 21.C cycle is going to be on the 21st of October. Okay. So I believe we've got some other things we can talk about. But I want to pause there for any questions on STTR program. And then, if we have any additional time and folks are interested, we can jump into these other things. But I want to make sure folks have an opportunity to ask questions and get their questions answered. So,
Jared, we did just have somebody raise their hand. Would you
good.
like to, Sarah, can we go ahead and unmute?
All right, you're allowed to unmute yourself and talk.
Yes, my name is Nikelsia, and I'm asking about the actual proposal. You have a template or some form of like RFO where we could review to make sure that we're following the criteria for this? Hello?
Yeah, I think you were pretty broken for me, but I think the question I heard was, are there templates for the proposals that you can use to make sure that you're on target when it comes to putting in a proposal? Is that true? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'm asking for the request for the proposal, meaning to have samples or criterias of how we submit slide presentation. Like I'm just trying to confirm how are we submitting this
yeah, absolutely.
STTR
So
proposal.
the long story short is, I don't think we actually did it this last time, but we usually do, is that we publish a template for the technical volume. So one of the things, let me see. I'm going to try something really quick. Pardon me. Six and seven. Okay. I'm going to pull up some details here, and I'm going to see if I can get to it. No, it's not going to let me. All right. Sorry for the delay there. So long story short is we do push out a template for the technical volume. A proposal is split into 6 different volumes. And some of them are pretty simple. There's nothing particularly special about it. Volume 2 is really what we kind of think of as the proposal. Long story short is it's a 25 slide pitch deck, right, for phase 1. For phase 2 and so on, the requirements go up, but for phase 1, a 25 slide pitch deck is in there, and the solicitation, the phase 1 solicitation, which is pushed out 60 days prior to the proposal due date. So it'll be pushed out, I believe, on the 23rd of August. We'll outline exactly what slides are required. There's a number of as applicable slides. So I think out of the 25, 11 are mandatory. 7 or 8 are optional or as applicable depending on your particular proposal. And then you can use the remainder to, reinforce certain sections if you think it's necessary, or, use those as you like. So we do push out a template that you can use. And we talk certainly through the evaluation criteria and what we're looking for in the solicitation itself as well. Okay.
Awesome. Will there be a webinar on that as well, or is that just through online resources?
Yeah, great question. So we do usually 2 or 3 AMAs, Ask Me Anything sessions, both for SBIR and STTR. So we do them, we do them in the same presentation. You can actually go back, I think, on the AFWERX YouTube channel and watch some of the previous iterations of that. Some of these slides will look familiar from that AMA. So we do webinars to kind of talk through, take questions, and so on about the programs. So you can expect that if the pre-solicitation opens up on the 23rd of August, you can expect those AMAs to happen, in the August, September timeframe.
Thank you
Absolutely.
so much.
All right. All right, Vanessa, I'm not seeing any other questions in the.
Yeah, there hasn't been many. So throughout the, go ahead.
One just came into the Q&A.
Okay.
Oh, great.
So from John, an anonymous colleague at NSIN would like me to apply to Open Topic with AFWERX. This would be a SBIR, not a STTR. Is there information to share regarding the Super X20? I'm not sure. So that isn't, sorry, I should have read beforehand. It's not directly relating to STTR. So if we get back to that question, we would answer it. We want to address the topic at hand right now, which is our STTR. John, expect a reply back shortly.
Yeah, and like we said, we'll have AMAs later on when we get closer to that 20.3 and 21.3, 21.c cycle. That'll answer questions on both. Great question from Bill. Do we have any insight when the notifications will be made for 21.a proposals? So I expect that the 21A proposals have the notifications have been sent out. If you haven't gotten that, feel free to shoot us a note at STTR@afworks.af.mil, and we can help run that down for you. Let's see. Next question down.
Great question.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, next question down is it possible to switch from SBIR to STTR from phase 1 to phase 2 and vice versa? It is. That is one thing that you can do. Like, the policy allows a transition between the two programs in between phases. It's just that transition is determined to be at, it's got to be favorable to the program and favorable to the Air Force, right? To move from one to the other. It's not a totally elective active or action, I should say. But it is something that's possible and something that we've done before. It's not historically been an option for folks. People just didn't know about it in many cases. But we're trying to open that up as an opportunity, right, to companies who to who that makes sense. Okay. In past webinars, great question from Paul. In past webinars, I've seen mention of a product requiring commercial traction to be eligible for SBIR. Is the only difference between STTR and SBIR the research involvement, or do you really need that commercial traction requirement? So I know when we first started doing the open topic, we kind of harped on this commercial traction. And one of the things that you may see, I don't know if I put it in the last, I'm going to go over to my last slide here. And you can kind of see it in this evaluation criteria. But, long story short is we want you to show us in your proposal that a lot of people care about this, right? That you have a market, both in the commercial space and in the defense space. These programs, this goes for SBIR and STTR, are designed for dual use products, right? So whether a company is trying to develop out their defense variant, product variant, or defense customer base first, or they went for the commercial space and then they're transitioning into the defense space, right? Whichever one you're trying to do first, or even at the same time, right? You may or may not have commercial traction in historical terms, right? So in sales, right? In terms of sales or subscriptions, or whatever your business model is. What we look for probably more specifically is input, positive input from a wide variety of sources, right? We want you to represent your market across the board. So if there's a few things that we talked through in the solicitation on references from the defense side, but we are looking for indications that this is a commercializable technology or product or what have you, right? So commercial traction to some folks just really means sales, and sales is certainly a great indication that people care about what you're doing, but there's lots of other ways to do that too. So I don't want to get wrapped around the sales metric so much. Investment, whether that's from the commercial side or from like research investment, right? If the Air Force Office of Scientific Research has helped fund the technology development of your tech product or technology, that can speak to the defense need, right? Which is one of our evaluation criteria here. So there's lots of things that you can do to kind of show us that lots of different people, both in the commercial space and then the defense space, care about your technology and could potentially be stakeholders or users or customers. Sales isn't the only way to do it. So that's kind of a roundabout way of answering your question, Paul, but let me know if there's kind of follow-ons there. From Matthew, is AFWERX an acceptable research partner for STTR? So government organizations and government labs are not able to be research institutions, right? So this has to be non-government entities, right? Some non-government entities, as you may have noticed in the definition or in kind of when I was talking, like military academies, for instance, military educational institutions are government, but they aren't classified, legally speaking, as a government lab. Right. So for instance, the Navy, when they go through here, they have the Naval Academy can participate as a research institution. However, the Air Force Research Lab would not be able to be qualified, would not qualify as a research institution in that regard. Right. So the AFRL would be a government lab, which would be not eligible. Something like an FFRDC, Federally Funded Research Development Center, while associated with the federal government, would not be considered a government lab and could participate. So that's the line there when it comes to research institutions. Okay, and I guess the short answer to your question would be that AFWERX as a government organization would not be able to be a research institution. Okay.
Jared, there is one question in the chat that I thought would offer a lot of information for the attendees.
Sure.
Where can they find the STTR topics?
So
I think we might need to explain the open topic process.
Sure. So when you look out and you Google SBIR, right, you're going to see a lot of different things, and you're going to see a lot of different offerings in different forms, right? And that it makes it a little bit confusing when you're trying to figure out, who's who in the zoo, right? And where you're supposed to be going and how you make sure that you're talking to the right person about the right thing. Long story short is the Small Business Administration, the SBA, administers these programs from a federal government perspective. There are a wide variety of participating agencies, and the DoD is one of those participating agencies. And then underneath that, each service has its own kind of iteration and iterations, plural, of these programs, right? So, when you look out and you talk about SBIR grants or STTR grants, for instance, that some agencies like the NSF offer grants in this space. Again, that's kind of where our contracts come in to play, for instance. So, what we're talking about here specifically is the Air Force's iteration of the SBIR and STTR program, and specifically the open topic, right? So the open topic is just one of the Air Force SBIR and STTR offerings. And so what we're talking about is scoped down not only just to the Air Force, but to the Air Force open topic. So you'll be able to identify the Air Force open topic. Let me go back here. The Air Force open topic, we tend to be topic number one, and we also use CSOs. So if you look kind of in the subtitle of the slide I pulled over to you, that CSO will be in the title. For STTR, we'll have the T and the letter, as we talked about before. But we want to make sure, you know, the title says open call for technologies, et cetera, right? So we want to kind of scope the conversation to the open topic, because that's kind of where what we're talking about here, today's presentation. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, very good. I see a couple of great questions in the Q&A here. One, would military hospitals be considered an RI, like a med group? Great question. So I would not expect a med group as a military organization to be able to qualify as an RI. They will be able to participate in the program, but from the government side, as opposed to from the research institution side. There are military hospitals. Obviously, those are military in nature, and military owned, operated, all that kind of fun stuff. So I wouldn't expect them to be able to participate as an RI. But that being said, many, I say normal, civilian commercial hospitals are nonprofits, right, as they're organized. So there are, a wide variety of nonprofit hospitals that could potentially, partner with you as a small business, and the, organizations coming through here in that capacity. So I wouldn't expect military hospitals or military organizations. They're not going to be able to participate as an RI, but their civilian nonprofit counterparts may be able to. So the definition I showed a little earlier is from policy. So, you can look it up, and if you have questions about a specific organization, you can give that definition to them, and they can help tell you if they would qualify or not. Okay. Good question from Ryan here. We recently got funded by Y Combinator. Great. And we have an S20.3 SBIR status is selected but not funded. Is there a chance that we might be able to close on a phase 1 SBIR? We plan to apply for the next window, but we wondered how to adjust your proposal. So is there a chance? Yes. Is it a substantive chance? Probably not. Right. So the chance that we're referring to here is a chance for other agencies. So we're talking about the DoD and the Air Force being one of the participating agencies. When you're selected and not funded, other agencies, so that could be another service. It could also be another federal agency like the NSF or DARPA or whoever could reach over and say, hey, I want to fund that effort. Right. And so that is the chance that we're talking about, and that is referenced in the notification letter there, in terms of, hey, you could be funded. The Air Force in this particular case has decided not to fund that particular proposal, but you could have other agencies that would like to, right? So in that case, we could pass that over to them. They could fund it, and you would go through their program. As far as feedback, you should, when you submit a proposal, you should always receive feedback on how you did, whether that's a contract, that's obviously positive feedback. But if you're not selected for whatever reason, there should be some, however vague it may be, there should be some feedback on why your proposal wasn't selected, right? Whether that be, it wasn't competitive from a technical perspective, or maybe there was missing paperwork for some reason. There's lots of different reasons why a particular proposal wasn't selected, but you should receive feedback on that in that notification letter specifically. Okay. Question from the anonymous attendee here. To clarify, military service academies, West Point and so on, could participate as a research institution. So recently we have gone through this exercise with our internal Air Force legal, and they have determined that the Air Force Academy was not able to participate formally, as the U.S. Air Force Academy, right? They were judged to be a government lab versus an eligible research institution, and that's kind of what we talked about before. The naval version of STTR does recognize the Naval Academy. We have not had a proposal that partnered with the Naval Academy or naval or any of the other service academies. So I can't say for sure what the legal read would be that on that particular proposal, but they have recently determined that the U.S. Air Force Academy, the way it's organized and so on, all the details associated with that, it was a government lab instead of being able to be a partnering research institution. So those are the two cases where I am familiar with that a determination has been made. One is with the Navy and one is with the Air Force. But one thing we have seen with this open topic, in one, talking about it, two, kind of talking through the research institution and who could participate, is that the breadth of research institutions has exploded, right? So certainly we still have the Stanfords and MITs, and we have the, the high-end research institutions and research universities that are participating with this program, right? And those are phenomenal, and but we've also seen an uptick in the different types of entrepreneurship centers, nonprofits, and other types of organizations like hospitals try to participate as well. And that's a huge deal, right? When you start to kind of open the aperture a bit to entire communities who didn't even realize they could participate, right? We've seen a lot of success there. So really excited to see how that continues to develop. Question here from an anonymous attendee. What about Air University? That's a great question. I haven't seen a determination come down for Air University. I think that would be a great conversation for us to have to see if Air University can participate. I think there's a lot of opportunity if that were the case. So, question from Nikelsia. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I apologize if I didn't. What day will the solicitation and instructions be published on the site? So I expect those the solicitation itself to include the attachments, the tech volume template to be published on the 31st, excuse me, the 23rd of August is the currently published date. So what you're going to look for if you go to I don't know if we have the link we can post, but the
Jared, I included the link in
oh, perfect.
the chat.
That's great.
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. So if you go to that link and you look at when the 21.c is going to open, that pre-solicitation date is when the documents become available publicly, and that's I think the currently is 23rd of August. When you go to that site, you kind of have to click different tabs depending on which solicitations you want to see. So you're gonna navigate to this 21.3 or X21.3 depending on how they label it. So just note the kind of decoder ring letters and numbers that I talked about a little earlier as far as the topic goes.
Right, and I think also pay attention because you will see it's for all DoD, so you will see Army, Navy, the other branches. So definitely make sure you're looking up Air Force.
Yeah, for sure. It's a alphabet soup for sure. When you get on there and all the solicitations are floating around, and you want to make sure you're looking at the right thing. So make sure you navigate to Air Force. Make sure you're navigating to the 21.c in this particular case, and the open topic. So that'll put you in the right neighborhood. And then obviously we'll have these AMAs that we talked about as well. That'll kind of talk through those specifically as well. I'm just kidding. Okay, let's see. I don't see any other questions, which means
we have one more hand raised. Jared, if we want to do that and then wrap up.
Sure. I was going to say, I mean, no more questions mean I did an amazing job presenting, but it sounds like we have more questions, so I'll hold that back a little bit.
Great information. All right, Mr. Del Campo, you can unmute and ask your question.
Looks like he jumped off.
Oh no.
So just a minute and see if anyone else has a question.
Yeah, great question from the anonymous attendee. Is it possible to apply for an SBIR and an STTR with the same idea or topic? If so, is there a better chance of getting one versus the other? So we don't publish, select rates for either program. So, is there a better chance of getting one versus the other? Is it really a toss up? Not to mention it changes every cycle as more or less people apply. But it is possible to apply for both an SBIR and an STTR with the same idea. You certainly can do that, right? So, of note, you're going to have you have to be eligible for both programs, right? So in the case of STTR, you're going to have the ineligible research institution and the applicable partnership documents in place. For SBIR, that's not a thing, right? You don't have those same partnership documents that's needed at proposal. Additionally, you'll note that SBIR and STTR have slightly different thresholds for who's performing the work. So for instance, we talked about the STTR research institution needing to do between 30 and 60% of the work, right? With SBIR, the small business has to do at least 50%, right? So you kind of have to work out the work breakdown or the making sure that you satisfy the respective threshold, right? So the proposals would have to be different in some important areas, but you can take that same idea and topic and apply it to both programs. Ultimately at the end of the day, so let's we'll fast forward in that process and kind of do a quick hypothetical, right? So you submitted the same idea to both topics, both the SBIR open topic as well as the STTR open topic, and you were selected for both, right? And we got to the point of you receiving 2 contracts, right? You'll have to reject one of those contracts, as the 2 things would be the same work, right, for both. And so ultimately, we would not be able, you wouldn't be able to keep both contracts, because again, you're doing essentially the same work for both, and that's not allowed under the fraud regulation and all that. So you can submit, but you can't accept it from both, if that makes sense. Okay.
I think we've covered just about everything, Jared.
Very good.
Do you see any more, Sarah, that we may have missed?
I don't see any more.
Excellent. So if you have questions, we have an STTR inbox. You can shoot us off a question, and our team will coordinate answers and help push you in the right direction. It's STTR. I can put it in the chat here so you can see it. STTR at AFWERX.af.mil. And I sent that to all panelists. We're going to send it to everybody this time. And you can hit us up for with questions that you have. We might point you to the website. We might point you to our AMAs. We can point you to other people, depending on what your question is, or we may be able to answer it ourselves, which is great. So, but it's a good source of information if you have questions, especially when it comes time for the solicitation to hit the street here in the fall. Okay. But if we don't have any other questions, I want to thank everyone for your time this afternoon or morning, depending on where you're at. And again, we look forward to seeing you as the next solicitation gets a little closer. We'll be on the AMAs, and you can watch more and see similar presentations on the AFWERX YouTube channel, and I'm sure on the website as well. So thanks all for your time again, and we look forward to seeing your proposals.
Thanks, Jared.